The plum season is here again, and as you know, it only comes once a year, and so we want to make use of our plums as much as possible before the season is out. And that's why in today's video I am sharing with you a simple recipe of how you can work with your plums to come up with these very delightful sweet rolls that I'm certain you will enjoy. Especially children this season will enjoy this particular one because I know mine did. And usually this recipe will work very well when you're working with plum jam, because what is left after the plum jam, you have the smooth plum jam, and now that the other part is still jam, I mean, if you eat it you will find it's very sweet, so you don't want to discard it or get rid of it. You use it for this particular recipe. So you could check out the recipe for jam that I will link as an end screen at the end of this video, so that you can make your jam, and then you have this part of the jam recipe that you can work with to make this very delightful recipe that I'm certain you will enjoy, especially this festive season. Welcome to Recipes and Hospitality with Clara. This is a channel where we share recipes that are simple, easy to do at home with ingredients toned down just like this one, to enhance your hospitality for the glory of God. And if you're new here and this is the kind of content you like, kindly consider subscribing, hit the notification bell. You'll be notified every time I upload new content. I upload this kind of content that is very simple to make at home with ingredients that are most likely available right where you are. So as is always our custom on this channel, we will pray and trust the Lord to grant us a fruitful time as we work on today's recipe. So Father, thank you that indeed you will grant us a fruitful time as we journey through this recipe. Please be with me and my viewer. Grant that you will be glorified as we do this, and everything we do in the kitchen for our hospitality, we pray that it will be a blessing and bring glory to you, oh God, in Jesus' name. Amen. So this is our plum jam discard that was left over after we made our jam. It is about a cup, but it could be half a cup, 3/4 cup, a full cup. That's still good, and slightly more. We will set that aside, and then in a separate bowl we will go ahead and add all the dry ingredients, including the spices, except the salt, because we don't want it to be in direct contact with the yeast. We'll give that a good mix, and then now add in the salt, give that a good mix again, and then make a slight well in the center. And I'm assuming that your yeast is very good. If you're not sure about your yeast, soak it in some warm water with a little sugar. Give that a stir, give it a few minutes on your counter. If it bubbles, then the yeast is good. So once I had made the well in the center, I added in the egg, I added in the melted butter or marge, and then I went ahead and added in half of the milk, and then continued mixing this with my hands to make a soft sticky dough. I used about 3/4 cup of milk. It could be slightly more than that, but the point is you want to make that really soft sticky dough as I'm doing. So once you've brought everything together, we will transfer this very soft sticky dough onto a floured surface so that we can knead it for about 3 to 5 minutes. Usually I knead my dough just to make sure that it smoothens out really well, kneads really well, and then I'm good to go. But if you want it to be really perfect, perhaps you could knead it for up to 10 minutes. But personally, as you know, in the house, there's always a lot to be done. I find when I do this for about 3 to 5 minutes, I'm good to go with my dough. I'm flouring the surface, of course, because it's a really soft, sticky dough, but you don't want to use too much flour. Just ensure to use flour when your hands get too sticky. But beyond that, just keep kneading it so that we can keep it as soft as we possibly can while working on it. So once we've given this dough a good knead, I'm going to transfer it back into my bowl. Yes, I've washed my bowl, but you can use your bowl the way it was. really it's still okay. And then I'm going to cover it with cling film. You can also cover it with a clean kitchen towel, that will still do. And we are doing this to allow this dough to proof or to rise for about 45 minutes to 1 hour, or until it has doubled in size. And then we will continue. So place it in a warm place in your kitchen, or if it's a sunny day outside, you can also place it outside so that it proofs faster. But if your kitchen is a bit cold, like usually this happens during the morning hours, like for me, I will usually take some hot water, place this on a smaller pan really, so that my bowl can fit in without really going down into the pan. Thankfully, this water is not too hot. You can see it's just hot enough. I am able to put in my finger. So I will just cover it slightly with a towel so that the heat doesn't get to the dough, because you don't want it to burn the yeast. You're providing really a warm environment, kind of a microclimate, so that the yeast can be able to work. Now that it will work well when the environment is warm. I had actually removed the towel at some point because the water was now getting warm and not very hot, so that it can continue helping with my yeast, so that it can cause it to proof. This was 1 hour later. You can see it had doubled in size. We will set it aside and go ahead and line our pan. It's an 11-inch in diameter pan that is slightly heavy, because this is that will bake very well on your gas stove without really burning your rolls before they are ready. We are lining it with baking paper, and I'm just trying to measure so that I have enough baking paper to go around the pan, and then I will trim off the excess. And the reason we are using baking paper rather than greasing our pan is because I just feel that with the fruit that we will use inside our rolls, it can easily stick on the pan. Of course, I need to try this to be sure it won't stick if we grease it, but I didn't want to risk. So it's better to just line your pan with baking paper and then trim off the excess so that you just have it fitting very well. And then we will go ahead to the next step of working on our dough. So once that is ready, set it aside so that now we can work on our dough. So we will flour our surface again, not with a lot of flour, because usually when the dough has relaxed, it will not usually stick on the surface too much. So you don't want to use a lot of flour. So we will knead it slightly just to ensure that we beat it down and it is smoothens out so that it's just even and nice and smooth. You can see even I removed some of the excess flour because we again don't want to affect its texture too much. So I will give it a slight knead for about 30 or so seconds so that it just gets together, and then we can go ahead and roll it out. So I'm going to roll it out to a rectangular shape. Usually I do about 37 centimeters in length and 27 centimeters in width. Remember, you don't have to do that exact size. It could even be 40 centimeters in length and 30 centimeters in width. Yeah, so it should be just around that neighborhood. So once I have got it to this rectangular shape, I'm going to take my marge, the one I'd set aside that is not melted, and then I'm going to apply it on this surface to just make sure that it's evenly distributed. So once you have applied it onto the surface and you can tell it's evenly distributed on the surface, we will now come in with our fruit. You remember the discard? Like I told you, it's very soft and at the same time very sweet. So I will again distribute it all around the surface like I did with the marge or butter. And then I'm going to again apply it as evenly as possible onto this surface like I'm doing. You just apply it onto the surface until it's evenly distributed on the surface and it has covered it fully. So once we've done this, we will now go ahead and begin to roll our dough like I'm doing. We are going to roll this fruity discard into the rolls until we have made a rope-like dough, as you will see in a short while. So once we've rolled in the fruit, I had left a little space on the edge just to make sure that I have a place to pinch in order to seal the fruit into this rope-like, dough that we have made, because we want to make them into rolls. So ensure just to pinch it off so that we have the fruit inside, and then we will continue. I'm now going to cut it into 10 equal pieces. I like to begin by cutting the edges first so that I have an even number where I'm able to cut the pieces as equally as possible. That's why I'm beginning by cutting off the 2 edges, because once we cut these 2 edges, we will have 8 pieces left now that we are working with 10 pieces. You can see we have 8 to go, so this will be easier now to cut. I'll divide it first into halves and then into quarters, as you can see, and then into 8s. So you can see it's now easier to divide into 8s. So now just cut them up so that in total you will eventually have 10 pieces. We will now take our pan. As you saw, I had worked on it, trimmed the edges of the baking paper, and now we have the pan. We will place our pieces into the pan. I'm just ensuring to arrange them in a way that they are evenly distributed in the pan. So once we've arranged them like this, I'm going to cover them with the lid I will use to cover them when they are baking. Now that I wouldn't want to use my kitchen towel because it is going to get all red. But anyway, I'll just use my lid and give it about 20 to 25 minutes so that they can proof a little on the counter before we go ahead and bake them. So this is about 25 minutes later. You can see they have proofed somewhat. So we are going to transfer them onto our cooker. I'm using the wider plate on my cooker. I will transfer them to my cooker that is on full flame, and I will allow them about 20 to 30 seconds just to heat up the pan on full flame, that is. So once we've done about 20 to 30 seconds and our pan has heated, so don't go away, you can forget and they will burn. We are going now to reduce this flame. Not the way it's been designed to be reduced by your manufacturer, because usually that lowest is still too high. It's going to burn your rolls before they are ready. So we are going to bring this flame back up, and then we will take it as though we are switching off and get it to that very low flame. Sometimes it's hard to get there, but you just keep working on it, switching on in case it goes off until you get to that flame, a very low flame that if you blew really hard on it, it would actually go off. This is the one that is going to bake our rolls for 40 or so minutes, depending on the size of your fire. For some it could take up to 50 minutes or an hour, but 40 minutes is good. So mine took about 40 minutes. You can see there's still cream on the surface, so meaning we need to do something about that. But what you just need to check for is the surface is not sticky, it's firm, because if it's sticky, they still haven't cooked, so you need to cover them and perhaps give them 10 more minutes. But usually you can see they have just firmed up. They may not have browned at all, but they have just firmed up on the surface. If you touch them like I did, you can tell they are not sticky. We need to invert them back into the pan so that this upper part can brown the way the under part has browned. Because they've firmed up, they are really cooked, really, but you want them to just brown on that surface so that you're sure that they have cooked also on the surface. So I'm going to turn them over onto a clean lid like I have done. Remove my baking paper. Let's take a look at them to see how they look. You can see they have browned really nicely. Some of the fruit has peeled and just looking very nice and delightful, as you can see. So now we will turn them over onto another lid because we would want that surface part to be back up like I have just done. So we are going to cover this again with our baking paper and then slide the pan back over them so that this part that hasn't yet browned can go inside the pan. Like I said, we want to invert them back into the pan. So that's how the process I take to ensure I invert them back into the pan. Yeah, so this is what we wanted. So we would put them back onto our very low flame like you have seen. And this time we are going to give them just 10 minutes because they will brown really fast now that basically they are ready. So 10 minutes later, you can see how they have browned on that surface. So I usually give them 10 minutes, but you could extend to 12 minutes perhaps if your fire is low, but 10 minutes usually is good. So you can see they are really nice. So we will set them aside and now work on our drizzle. By the way, this is optional because the rolls themselves are sweet enough. But as we know, this is characteristic of rolls, especially when you're adding something in the rolls, such as cinnamon or, whatever. We like to drizzle them with some drizzle that I'm making with juice of 1 large juicy lemon with a cup of icing sugar. I'm going to mix into the lemon because depending on the size of your lemon, you may not even use the whole 1 cup of icing sugar like you saw. I used about 3/4. The issue is you want to get it to that consistency you have seen. So mix that with your wooden spoon until you get it to a really drizzly, fairly thick but fairly thin consistency so that we can drizzle it on our plum jam roll. So if you have a really sweet tooth or you have children who wouldn't mind this, you can actually work on the drizzle and drizzle them with some. But if you don't want too much sugar, you don't have to work on a drizzle because, like I said, these are already sweet. So try this recipe, especially after you've worked on your plum jam, and I trust you will enjoy it like we did. Enhance your hospitality for the glory of God. I mentioned that I will link as an end screen the jam recipe that I did just the previous week. You can find it right here so that you can make use of this plums that we are seeing all over the place this plum season. Make lots of jam and perhaps meal prep, and what is left you can work on a recipe such as this one that I've shared with you that I'm certain you and your household will enjoy. So thank you so much for joining me. Look out for our next recipe. Again, very simple, easy to make with ingredients that are most likely available right where you are. And until that next recipe, see you then or in this video right here.